I love weak monsters. Specifically, monsters with weaknesses that can be puzzled out. Sometimes these monsters are actually among the most powerful monsters that you'll ever face, unless you learn their secret. And that's the DMing design key that we are unlocking today. How to take your bag of hit points and turn them into an experience of discovery and challenge and strategy. Because not all weaknesses are good. Some actually suck the fun right out of the game. Welcome to the channel. My name is Timothy, though some people do call me Tim. I've run over 1,000 games of 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons since 2021 and been DMing for almost 30 years. There are plenty of examples of creatures with weaknesses in D&D, and not all of them are built equally. In fact, some of them kind of suck. And that's not a vampire pun, but vampire weaknesses, which are so well known that they're not interesting to discover, can be problematic. Shout out over to Jeremy at Insight Check for his analysis of this effect. Then there are skeletons and the like, which are trivialized by a vulnerability to such a common damage type. And of course, obscure weaknesses that'll never be discovered, like the Rakshasa. Rakshasa. It's just fun to say. Takes me back to my Lion King childhood days. Anyway, piercing damage only from somebody under the influence of a bless spell. Only luck, prior experience, or DM intervention by way of exposition at some point will make that one known. Or reading the stat block, which most DMs kind of frown about. You might be able to slip that into the research the monster phase of a Monster Hunter campaign if that's what you're doing, but it's going to be a challenge to just slip in there otherwise. Each of these weaknesses leaves something to be desired. Either there's no need for discovery, no challenge, or no way to discover it. And after looking at weaknesses like these, it might be tempting to think that you're better off without them. But weakness is actually the key to better combat in D&D. Because weaknesses don't just lower the difficulty of the encounter, they actually change the encounter on a fundamental level. Or they can. Because discovering a weakness is exciting, but only if there's a reason that you should, and only if you know you should. In a recent poll that I ran on the channel, only 1% of people didn't enjoy discovering a weakness upon an enemy that they were facing as a player. Which is kind of intense, because really, how often do people on the internet agree on something that much? So when adding weaknesses to our monsters, there are 3 criteria that need to be met. First, there needs to be a sufficient challenge to make the weakness tempting. Discovering blunt weapons harm skeletons is cool at first level, but by 3rd level, unless there's a horde of them, it's kind of blasé. Second, it has to be discoverable. There's no point in hiding a weakness behind ultra-specific conditions that will never come up and never be guessed. And finally, it has to be foreshadowed. This ties right back into discovery. You need to indicate to their players that there is something to discover if you want them to do something other than the usual pattern of use the biggest stick until it stops moving. First, and I don't know why I really have to say this, but I do need to say this to some of you. When you're looking to add a weakness to a monster to improve your session, you should be intending and planning on it being used. This might seem obvious, but it's not. Because one of the main complaints amongst DMs that I'm coaching about weaknesses is that they get used and then trivialize the encounter, which is only possible if you don't plan and expect it to get used when you design the weakness, or at least when you plan for the battle. When using creatures with strong weaknesses, it's okay to bump up the difficulty and trust your players to figure out that weakness, especially if the encounter would have otherwise been easy or moderate in difficulty. Trust your players and the system to get them through, or leave leave a narratively appropriate option for flight or surrender in the battle, and then use monsters with weaknesses only in situations where discovering that weakness will be important and helpful to the players to the point where it will make a big difference. Ideally, they'll either discover the weakness and save strength while cheering for themselves and their ingenuity, or they'll fail to do so and will expend more resources, thus adding greater tension to the next encounter. Either of those results is a total win. When it comes to discovery, unless you're running a campaign for a bunch of players that are not into fantasy or mythology or generally plugged into the common consciousness, some weaknesses are just known. Medusa isn't allowed to look into her reflection. Trolls don't like fire. And vampires are allergic to a sharp piece of wood being stabbed into their heart while they're sleeping, like the rest of us. Anyway, unless these are a surprise for your players, weaknesses that you add yourself are significantly better than ones that they just automatically know. Because it's the moment of discovery of a weakness that just does it for some players. It's actually one way that you can mix together the pillars of play, like I talked about in this video over here, so that you can keep things fresh and fun. So yes, make sure that the weakness is something that they can find, but probably not something that just stands out a mile away. The big red targeting circle on the chest is probably out. It's a fine balance, and honestly more art than science. And sometimes it's gonna flop and you're gonna womp your players because they can't figure it out, which is fine from time to time. And other times it's going to flop and your party is going to immediately roast your boss. And that's fine too. There's always another boss to threaten them with. Speaking of threatening, foreshadowing is not just about warning of upcoming danger. It's also important to telegraph your monster's weaknesses. Because while discovering a weakness is exciting, without clues to follow, it's not discovery. It's just dumb luck. And we already have natural 20s to cover the luck department. Foreshadowing weakness can take many forms, but ultimately it's about hinting at its existence without outright saying it. Another art versus science thing. Perhaps a sunlight-sensitive monster flinches when bright light or radiant damage is brought nearby. A creature weak from attacks from behind might be narrated as constantly scrabbling to get you in front of them where their shield can protect them. Or maybe a monster conspicuously interposes itself between you and its antithesis in the environment behind. Regardless, there is one really important thing to remember about weaknesses and foreshadowing. Players suck at catching hints. They're like husbands. So if you're going to hint once, hint 3 times. If your players don't seem to put any effort into following your hints, make them more blatant. Work at it until you understand what it is that is going to make your players curious at your table. Because unfortunately, it won't look the same at your table as it does at mine. And don't listen to anyone who tells you that it will. If you're interested in receiving occasional enemy weaknesses and other ideas and inspiration in your email, then sign up for my newsletter. And if you're worried that adding weaknesses is going to reduce the tension and danger level at your game, then realize that there are ways around that. 7 of them are in this next video here, actually. So enjoy the kitties, watch the video, and I'll see you there.